Good. Oh, yep, now it does. Yep. Okay, on mine. Yep. Okay, good. Good morning, everybody. Oh, that's a great slide, Lisa. So this is one of our Michigan Co-op relationship calls. This is something that Cindy and I talked about after the VLAX call that we had a while back. Just kind of, wanting to kind of find or build conversation around that, knowing how important it is, and not just, the academic anymore, and not just some of our conversations are kind of focused on, competency-based education, that kind of stuff. And that's all very, very important. But I think emphasizing these relationship calls is extremely valuable to all of us, because I think we all know that in our lives, there's probably nothing more important. And with our students, there's nothing more important. And Nicole, if you could again give a little bit of overview of, your role with West Michigan Virtual, and kind of, jumpstart some of our thinking again, we'd appreciate that. Anything you want to share right out the gate. And then the rest of you, please feel free to jump in with a question, because we're not on the webinar. You guys will, those of you who are on the webinar, you'll be able to put something in the chat if you want to, but even there, just feel free to jump in. The only thing we may need to do, and right now it seems very quiet, but there are times when somebody is in the car or something and the background noise gets to be pretty loud. And if that happens, we'll ask everybody to mute until you do have a question. So in the meantime, Nicole, if you'd take it away and kind of get us started, that would be wonderful.
Okay, probably I'd like to start just a little bit of my background, just to kind of let you know how I got to where I am today. And it seems like it's been probably 100 years, but it hasn't been that long when I found myself in beautiful Traverse City going to school. And at the time, I couldn't decide if I wanted to concentrate on child development or criminal justice, which seemed kind of an odd combination, but I did take a little bit of both and ended up transferring down to Western, and then went into criminal justice sociology. And I started working in corrections of all places. It was a nonviolent correction center, residential center. Did that until I became a protective services worker. So I did that for probably about 7 years. I investigated child abuse and neglect. Decided to get my master's degree in social work so I could become a therapist, because I thought children, we were not meeting the needs of children. And so I kind of saw the child development piece, saw the criminal justice piece, and really decided to focus on children. I didn't think, a lot of times we put a lot of therapy into our adults, but we were, in my opinion, we're not meeting the needs of children. And, I'm going to schools and interviewing kids in schools, and they're becoming behavior problems. So started my own private practice and did that for several years, and then found myself doing school social work at the virtual center. So that's kind of how I got to where I'm at. And now that I've been here for, I think this is starting my fourth school year. So I've kind of seen a little bit. And now I'm really concentrating on educating our staff on the trauma piece, toxic stress, how it negatively impacts children, how it leads to changes in how they feel, behave, learn, and interact with others, and how they actually view themselves. So it's been very interesting. I've had quite a bit of leeway here, because obviously there wasn't a social work program before I took the job. So I'm kind of, learning as I go. And that's kind of led me to where I'm at. And now we're really pushing the piece of relationship building here, and why it's so important, and meeting kids at their needs and where they're at. I'll take a little pause there in case.
Yep. I have a question. This is Marcia. So as there are going to be a lot of different angles to kind of what you've just said. One of the things I'm wondering about is how are you kind of, how are you managing to kind of build this conversation around relationships? Are you meeting regularly? Are you setting goals with the group? Is this for mentors and teachers or all the above? And how are you kind of putting those conversations together?
Well, we have probably about 30 kids that come into the center because it's not mandatory attendance as of yet. So we started out by, I observed probably most of my first year, and then we just continue to put more and more things into place. And even for myself, it's been interesting to develop that relationship piece. And we all had that teacher in school that was the popular teacher and that's obviously not the goal to be the most popular, but it's, you could see who has the best relationship, because those teachers, because I meet with the teachers once a week and we do our interventions. So if students aren't meeting their goals or where they need to be for the week, I meet with teachers once a week and we'll talk about those in different tiers and how to meet their needs. We have, and it's just become really obvious to me how the teachers that have the really good relationships, for instance, I'll say a name and they'll say, okay, this is where they live, this is where their parents work, this is what they like to do. I know, that relationship piece, there's more than just the, hey, you didn't make your progress last week, or they'll say, I can't document all the times that I talk to him a week because my log would be too long. So the conversations are not just about the math that they're struggling, is, the relationship that ended and, the work permit that they want, or, what they want to do, future goals. It's really obvious to see that those relationship pieces are important. Would that help out your question, Marcia?
It does. And I think one of the things that my follow-up question would be, for the teachers or the mentors that you're talking with who are, kind of more focused on just the academic or the progress, how do you kind of interact with them to kind of get them to be more relationship oriented?
Well, I think because we have the Pulse now, and that really documents everything and really has created some center statistic goals that we need to, it's really easy to see, okay, this person speaks to their students twice a week. This one is, maybe every other week, or this one doesn't, call in at all. We've noticed that the increased amount of conversations increases the relationship, or improves the relationship, and actually improves the productivity in the student. They're asking more questions. We're showing the correlation between the positive relationship and the amount of work that they're doing. And if there's not, then we are digging a little bit deeper. So, for instance, the reason why I was a little delayed this morning is because we had called a mom last week and pulled out the CA60, went through it, and trying to figure out what the barriers are for the student. And there's mental health barriers, some medical barriers. None of them are on the file. So we're creating even a deeper relationship, because now we're going to try to figure out and tear it apart to see what needs and what barriers are there, and how can we help to bridge so the student becomes more successful.
Nicole, this is Cindy from Gull Lake. When we had you on the line a couple of weeks ago, one of my takeaways, and I think you're talking about it now, but maybe a little bit more specifically, was those weekly meetings that you have where the mentors talk about the kids that are struggling or they're not doing their two-way or whatever, and how much that benefits all of the mentors. And even if they aren't, I think you mentioned, even if they weren't having any trouble, they should be at the meetings because they might be able to help some of the other mentors. Could you talk a little bit about that for maybe some of the people that weren't on last time?
Sure. So we have the one program, and it kind of spits out all of our statistics for us, so we don't have to do much from that. But then I meet with the teachers. It was just myself meeting with the teachers, but now we have Lee Acker. She's a retired teacher from Greenville, and she does some of the academic interventions. And we'll meet as a team with each one. The goal is 30 minutes, but it takes all day. And it is because, what we started out was, let's meet with your three students that we could develop interventions with. Well, that's great in theory, but what we think is important doesn't always, the teacher really is the professional on their caseload. So we always give extra time. It's funny because I'm much more social worky and flexible, and Lee's much more time orientated and structured. And she'll be like, we're off schedule, and it just happens because once you start talking to teachers about students, but we will talk about, so isn't doing what they need to or not meeting progress. Like, tell us about that. And the student or the teacher will bring in their CA60. Although a lot of times we don't open it, for some we do open it. We'll look at, take that opportunity to look at some testing scores. We'll look at past schools, past performance, really kind of dig into that student and get to know them. It's truly been a benefit because in the past, a lot of the teachers, they wouldn't read the CA60s. So there wasn't, let's see, last week we pulled a couple CA60s. Since we started doing this, we learned one student, believe it or not, he lost his dad to suicide in 2009, and he lost his brother to suicide in 2015. And he has dropped out of school, came here, and just not performing and not getting his work done. So that led to a face-to-face interview with mom and son's 17. It's just a very kind of an intimate way of creating a plan, kind of acknowledging to the family, okay, this is what we understand what's going on. This is what we're seeing academic-wise. So it's really it's good for it's really kind of a one-on-one intimate way of dealing with the whole family and the whole picture. And I think for some mentors and teachers, they're comfortable with it, they're okay with it, and at other times they're not so much. But I'm involved with all that. We've been getting release of information from parents to set up individual plans. I think it's been really helpful. And within the last even couple months, our increase in student productivity has gone up. I can't even tell you how much. It's been quite a bit. So I think it's pretty helpful.
Hi, this is Betsy from Gull Lake. To follow up on that, what do you think is the percentage of students that you're addressing in the weekly meetings? You said you asked the teachers to bring their their top 3.
Well, you know, if
and you're talking about struggling students, so like, you know, what percentage of how many students is this tackling? I'm assuming it's not like your whole student population every week.
No, I mean, I think because I've been around a lot longer than Lee's been here since September, and she just got involved within the last couple of months on the intervention, looking at more the academic piece. So I think we had discussed it to go in and do 3 a week on each person's caseload, and I think we have 6, 7 teachers. So for me, that wasn't enough, because I'm like, okay, we're dealing with 20 students. We have 350, 340. For me, that was leaving out a lot of students. So, but believe it or not, when we would deal with those 3, they would come back the following week. 2 would now be successful. They would now be getting their 30% requirement for the week. So we'd only deal with 1. So then I would have them add 3 more. So, so that was, and I know I'm not answering your questions, because so Lee and I did that together, but on top of that, I would have mentors. Okay, I know you'll let's say you have 40 on your caseload and you only brought in 10 over the last, 3 weeks. I would still deal with all the other ones. So all the other ones, they would send me in an email. We wouldn't deal with them in our interventions, but I would deal with them one-on-one. So that's what I do 24/7. I'm dealing with all those other ones. So I think we're really hitting a lot. I don't have the numbers, but we deal with 320 in a meeting, and then some will send me 15 in an email, and I'll make contact with those 15. I think
so you're
the
dealing
big
with
thing,
like 1 and 5%. Sounds like. I mean, because if I'm thinking of meeting with all my mentors and 800 students once a week, like that's just not gonna happen. So like, kind of how do you prioritize? So I think you did answer the question.
Well, I think, and I think we struggle with that because I know Lee wanted to follow that same 3 out through the end of the year. So she wanted to follow the same 3. And for me, if they're being productive, then you as a teacher follow them. You don't need to bring them back in. I don't need to not that I don't want to hear about them again, but there are other ones that I want to put on and become. So it's almost like a tier system. Who are the most urgent? Who are the ones that we want to deal with that are actually doing like absolutely nothing? Those would be the ones that are most important. For some, and it depends on the teacher. Some will say, hey, I really want to watch the middle school group, or hey, I really want to concentrate on the 16, 17-year-olds because they're so close to 18 where you can drop out. Those are the ones. Yeah, but if you have 800, I mean, obviously you wouldn't be able to do those weekly. So you'd have to develop what tier level that is imperative that you deal with. But I think because I don't have a caseload, I have a lot more time, so then I can make those contacts individually. So it kind of takes it out of the teacher's hands. Does that make sense?
Nicole, this is Rose. I'm from the TCAPS program, Northern Michigan Partnership. And first of all, I want to thank you for coming on and doing this. I had taken several takeaways from your last presentation as well. And our program's quite a bit smaller, I think, than what you guys are doing. So we don't have the capacity necessarily to have someone on staff that would have the role that you do, which I think is amazing. But what I had kind of started to implement in our program is to, myself, I'm doing one-on-one teacher interviews once a month so that they have the opportunity to talk about different students. So I appreciate, you know, you giving us that idea to start that off. But I've also put into our administration about kind of offering us the resource of a counselor from the district on an occasional basis. And I was just wondering if you had any feedback or insight or ideas on, you know, the best way for us to potentially utilize a resource like that on a pretty limited basis is what I'm assuming we will get. I mean, would you focus on students that are struggling? Would you focus on students that are trying to get to that next career level, that are more high school? I mean, so I guess there's that. And then also my other question was, how do you handle families that really don't want you to interfere in what they're doing, even though you feel they need the help?
Oh, that's a good question. Let's see, where do I want to start? As far as the outside resource, do you have access to the CA60s with you?
We do.
I mean, okay. So what I'm finding is that is like a historical, I mean, it's the child's story. And I think for me, I go through that with a fine-tooth comb, and it really tells me a lot about, you know, the medical file, and we have a lot of our students that kind of bounce around, you know. So how many schools have they been in and out of? Have they lived with what parent? It's just kind of a good thing to start out with. And I don't know if you require or encourage your teachers to review those, but I know the ones here, we have some teachers that will go and review those right away, and they will bring it to me and say, okay, hey, I need help with this because, and it kind of gives us an idea of where to go with a student or what to expect or even how to address the family.
That's good to know. I guess I didn't realize that they had rights to be able to view them as a teacher. We've always had it just be admin. So that's good to know that it's not something that teachers can't look at. Are there CA60s?
Yeah, we have them when they come in, and some of them forget, but when they come into our weekly meeting, we have them in our weekly meeting. And I go, like I said, I go through them with a fine-tooth comb. Now, I don't know how your outside counselor, I don't know if you would go through that and have that prepared and say, okay, this is what we're seeing from the family, this is the past, and kind of create that scenario for and I don't know if it'd be a therapist or it'd be a social worker or psychologist, and how they would reach out to the family. And I know you mentioned something about like school and transitioning, and that was one of the things that I said right away. I'm not a guidance counselor. I don't do like FAFSA. I don't do that bridge to, I guess, their future after high school. Huge need. I mean, I think that's something definitely I want to see within the next year that we get into, that transition period after, because there is a need. Unfortunately, I don't have enough time. There's not enough time in my day to do that. So I think we'll develop that probably before the fall, something like that. And the families, I think, in fact, like I said, I was talking to one mom this morning, and we were going to do, the teacher wanted to do mandatory attendance in the center because they're not getting anything done. I pulled the CA60, reviewed it, called the mom, and the son has an enormous amount of mental health issues. But it's to the point where we don't have anything official in the medical file. And I think I have a little bit more leeway, because when I talk to mom, I'm like, I'd like to have a release of information from the doctor, and I'd like to have one from the therapist, because I just don't feel like we're meeting the needs. And when you said that there are some families that are really, they just don't want you in their business. It comes down to I understand that you don't want us in your business. However, in order for the student to be successful and graduate, especially in, I think, a virtual system, there comes a time when you have to look at, is this like a truancy avoidance? Is this a school avoidance? Is this like, you really have to dissect it. And I don't, at least for our teachers, they don't have the time. So I think that's where my position has come in. Because I ask a lot more questions, probably a lot more touchy questions. And, she, getting to that point where she's comfortable with me and she trusts me, and I say, okay, we have to do this together, because at some point we have to say, is this an appropriate place for your son? Does he need to go somewhere else? Because I don't feel we're meeting his needs. So I don't know if your outside resource would be able to do that. I mean, it's quite expensive, because she will eventually come in next week, and then we're going to have to come up with an individual plan for him. And it's going to be a psychological plan. It's going to be a school plan, or I just don't see him finishing.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I mean, from my perspective, because our program is mainly, they're all homeschoolers right now. So, they're all doing it on their own. So it's almost like by me bringing in, though, a TCAPS counselor, I feel like they might be able to provide them with additional resources as to what maybe else is out there if this isn't working. So it's, I almost want to be able to, like, they're not going to give them all the answers, but at least they would be able to give them more resources than maybe what I have available from the homeschool side, that, maybe it is being in the public schools is best for them, or these are certain programs that are beneficial. Because I would imagine that the majority of the students that we would be having I guess I'm not sure, but a lot of them that we've been having so far that are maybe struggling a little bit are ones that are special needs, that are coming out of public schools, the parents trying to help them. And it's maybe not working. So sometimes maybe they need somebody else to tell them it's not working, or these are other things that you could do to make it work.
Yeah, I think that's a good assessment, because a couple of the homeschool kids that I've had the contact with recently, it was, they were homeschooled for a couple of years, then they went back. I'm thinking of one young man in particular. Mom and dad both own their own businesses. Sister, he had some medical issues when he was younger, and mom and dad have really tried different things, but here we are now. He was a behavior problem in school. I don't know how to end my call. I'm sorry if you can hear that. And now the parents have him in our program, and he's struggling in our program and working from home. But now we have to assess, because I don't think he was ever really a behavior problem. I think he struggles with the work. So now we have to reach out to the community and resources to get him help, to get him to where he needs to be. Does that make sense? I mean, you're right. I think there's a lot of community resources that are out there that have to be put into play for some of these kids.
Yeah, no, I think that's really helpful. I mean, I think really that's what, all of our roles are. It's just how do we connect these people? Because it's not like we can do it all ourselves, but how do we, connect them with the people that can help them?
Right, and I think the parents, at least from my perspective, a lot of these parents have really come and thrown their hands up in the air and have said, okay, we've really exhausted our efforts. We've tried absolutely everything. Now what do we do? And I mean, they're exhausted because he went from, like the dad said, when he was 7, I could throw him over my shoulder and take him to school. He's now 14, so I can't do that anymore. And they're kind of desperate to get the help because they have tried everything. So I've just found my role to be working with the teachers and the mentors to understand, okay, this isn't a student that is manipulating, or he is not. And that's what I think the attitude has changed a lot even here. Because I don't think they're trying to manipulate the system. And I don't think that they're lazy, which is what a lot of people think. It's, you know, looking back and kind of digging into it and seeing, okay, he was 2 and he was in the hospital for 3 months in a coma. And then when he was, that was 2 months. Then he was 2, he was in for another 3 months for something else. And then all of a sudden after that, things went downhill. So linking him up with a trauma therapist outside of here to deal with some of that stuff, I mean, I guess we're just trying to deal with like the whole person, because, and educating the teachers to know that it's not the child. There's nothing wrong with the child, or they don't even know what's wrong with themselves. Do you understand that part?
I'm wondering if there's questions on like first steps. Like when you first came, what were some of the first things that you did that people could be setting up?
The first step as far as the teachers, or the first step for like parents?
Well, as districts are looking at building these relationships with students, you know, granted, both parents and the teachers, it's important, but where should they focus on first? I mean, should they be doing professional development with their teachers to understand the importance of these relationships? I think part of the thing that some of the districts are going to struggle with is the volume of students that they have compared to what you have at West Michigan Virtual. So I'm just wondering if there's a way for them to get started on that process without the manpower, you know, the ratio that you would have.
Well, I think it starts with educating the teacher and having them look at the student as an individual, in that sometimes, yeah, academics are very important. However, we are going to spin our wheels if there are barriers that stop the student from working. So I think empowering the teacher to look at the individual person. And I mean, I think we have the very high functioning here that are, you know, dual enrolled and in college and, you know, homeschooled and taking a class, and those, I think we pretty much know that you have your normal relationship, but they're doing well. And then you just, you know, they have such different needs. And I think, I don't know if it's developing your own kind of tier level of, I don't know what the student to teacher ratio is. I mean, ours, I think we have right now probably 60 to a little bit less, maybe 53 to 1. So there's, I mean, yeah, that does give them a lot more time. But I think the big thing is being able to take those ones. I mean, I think empowering your teacher to trust their instincts. If you have one that you're particularly concerned about and you just can't put your finger on what's happening with the student or what's going on with its family, being able to reach out in a meeting or sending an email and saying, hey, can you take a look at it? And having someone take I think that's been helpful. So if I take a look at it and I say, yeah, there's some serious concerns, let's get the parent in. And that's one thing that I've really tried to do too. And I know like you said, with time constraints, you can't always do this, but sometimes a 20-minute meeting or a half an hour face-to-face meeting with a parent, it's been very beneficial to find out what's going on. But I understand you can't always do that.
Nicole, this is Marcia again. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that, you're talking about one aspect of the relationship building, and I think in my years with virtual learning and in brick and mortar, there's something to be said for getting a kid to feel like they belong they're a part of the setting, whether it's brick and mortar or online. I think the online part is a little bit harder to do, but it's equally important. I mean, is that something you guys feel is important? And in other words, because I've been pushing forever for these advisory groups for virtual, because I've just really felt that when I see that in place, it really can make a difference for a kid who says, we get together once a week online and we interact with each other, and I've got this group of people that are, my virtual friends, and if I'm working on a project or a math class or whatever it is, I can reach out to them in between these calls because they're part of my advisory group. You get to know them. So the kids get to know each other and they feel like they belong to something other than just a virtual school. Do you address that in any way?
We do. We have our Facebook, we have secret student groups, so the students have access to each other, and it is monitored. And we have like secret parent groups that not everyone they don't have access to that as well. And I think that's been really helpful because the students can connect through, and it's monitored, obviously, but they can connect on that. They can do the instant messaging between each other. We can do instant messages, in a group. So I think that's been very helpful because there are some kids that, other than mandatory attendance, they're just not coming in. And they don't have to because they can, they are successfully doing their work outside of here. But I think it's for our teachers using those platforms. I mean, I have mine on my computer, so it comes up all the time. And I will still get messages from my students in Three Rivers, and I haven't been out there in 3 years. And they will still, and I know all about them. They are still, hey, Miss Nicole, that. So how much more do you have to do? And am I coming to your graduation? And I think some teachers and mentors are not comfortable with that. And we've really had to stress they don't have to be in front of your face to create that relationship. You just, even if you send them an instant message or they know that you can, you don't have to respond 24/7, but if it pops up and you're there, even through instant messaging through the virtual school, you can establish and have successful relationships with your students. And they can have them with each other too.
Nicole, this is Cindy from Gull Lake. I have a question for you. When you talk about teachers and mentors, so do you operate with both teachers of record and mentors? Do you have both those roles?
Yes, we have teachers of record here, and then we have 2 mentors that are here as well. And I operate with them all. We do week-to-week meetings or weekly meetings, and they send me emails with referrals and concerns weekly. So I do have meetings with both.
And then, so do the mentors and the teachers of record kind of work together with the individual kids when necessary?
Yeah, they'll work individually with on academics and the relationship building piece. They're all of them are required to reach out and do both with students.
And then they can make each other aware of what's going on with a family, with that relationship that they have, right?
Yeah, we encourage, because we're all in the same building, we encourage like the face-to-face, but even through email, or we all have access to each other's pulse notes, so people will get on and look at the teacher's logs, or we have 3 different classrooms, so if one student goes into a particular classroom for or whatever reason, there's always that communication in between mentors about anything that happens, or their attendance, or and we've been, and I think I mentioned this last call, we've been much more flexible with switching or moving mentors and teachers. Some students just work well, or we know they're going to work better with different personalities. So we've made it very clear, don't take it personal. But this person is not getting their needs met, and it has nothing to do with you personally, but we just think this other mentor is a better fit. And we will do that. We're doing that more than I think we have ever in the past.
I'm kind of wondering too if any of you have other ideas and suggestions. I know that one of our future calls, not this one, but one of the future calls, because I'm getting a lot of questions about how can we approach, how can we get a different method in place, protocol in place for attendance, other than, the 2-way communication, which we did talk about last time. And, some of you see that as just kind of almost a negative. But, aside from that, what other kinds of ideas are you implementing in your own districts to kind of help with those relationships? Nicole, do you find that having those meetings once a week, because there's more than one staff member in there, does that help them to build their relationships amongst each other, the teachers and mentors?
Yeah, it's myself and Ms. Acker, and then whoever the mentor is. And I've been and I think I'll probably implement this next year. Not this year because we have too much going on with testing and graduation and stuff coming up. But what I'd actually like to see, and it's probably more of a therapy background, my therapy background, when you work in centers or when you do group work, you bring in what I'd like to do is everyone brings in one case file, and we just staff it. So this is the one I'm having trouble with this week. And I think all around that would help with mentors and teachers and connections. Let's look at the strengths of the student, start with the strengths, and discuss it. And then let's talk about the barriers. What do we think that we could do? Or just creating that camaraderie, I guess. And because I think sometimes, even though we're in a small building, we all kind of are doing our own thing. And I think this time of year I think teachers get a little down. Kids are already on spring break and their minds are on spring break. They're ready for, or they're, not being successful. It's easy to kind of get down on yourself and down on your students. And so I think that staffing all together with one, and it might take an hour and a half, but now we've discussed 12 students in an hour and a half and come up with ideas, brainstormed ideas on, and we all know intimately now 12 students. I'd like to start that next year. I think we're going to do it in the fall. And then our weekly meetings, I cannot imagine not having weekly meetings, honestly. I think we started out with, people are like, okay, this is like a waste of my time. And now people are like, oh my gosh, this is so much helpful. And we're really, 3 heads are better than one. And we're all kind of, it takes a village, I think, for some of these students.
It's interesting you bring that up because one of the years, so Mike Murray was the principal at the junior high that I taught at. And one year he made it possible for us to have 2 prep periods, one of which was meant for teams. So we had a team of 6 teachers and we met every day. And the intent was that we would meet every day for 1 hour and the other hour was our prep. And honestly, I mean, almost every day we met for 2 hours about the kids and the input. And we structured every day differently. Sometimes we'd have a student, sometimes it would be a family. But a lot of the times, I mean, it was the 6 of us or as many of us could be there as possible. And what we learned from each other was amazing. Not only what we learned from, because a kid might open up to somebody else and not to me, and share something in a moment, at a junior high when you get a quiet moment, when they would share something. But the other thing that would happen is that, we were more on top of things. So if, we heard something from one of the other teachers that helped us to better understand this student and why they might be, falling behind or what's going on at home or whatever, it really just immediately kind of put a different spin on our interaction with each of these kids. And sometimes it was also because they realized that because we were sharing with each other, we were being more consistent with each student. So if the expectation was blah, 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 we all shared that expectation with that kid. It might be, academic progress, it might be whatever it was, but there was consistent message going to the kids. That team approach was just, and then after that, for various reasons, we couldn't do it anymore, but that was probably the most powerful year I can ever recall with kids. It was amazing.
Well, and I think just for the mental health of the teachers as well, I mean, and probably for their families, because I know I leave here and I have several stories that I will say, and I obviously won't use the names, but I'll say, oh, to my youngest, I talked about you today, really? Oh yeah, it was, about another 6th grader, and, or, to my significant other, I'll talk about some students, and, those, it's just mentally, when you download and talk about a particular student with your peers, I think you're clearing your mind, and some teachers will walk out of here a little more upbeat and a little bit, that camaraderie and that help. And sometimes I think at this time of year, we don't look at strength-based either. It's easy to really concentrate on the negative. And, especially the weather in Michigan, if you are a strength-based approach and all right, let's talk about the strengths first. And then you'll always have a couple that'll go back to negative, and you're like, okay, I understand that, but let's go back to the strengths. How can this be a strength? I think you're empowering your teachers to look at it a different way.
like that. That's very cool. Well, I think, we're at about our hour, so I think we can wrap things up. This has been immensely valuable. I love conversations that step away from, the more traditional conversations we have about kids. So, your feedback for those of you who are either online with us now or listening later, please let Cindy and me know what you think, because we're the ones who are kind of facilitating the organization of this. And one of the things that Lisa and I talked about is we're kind of looking at planning for the year ahead for the Michigan Co-op is, what topics have been really of value to all of you, or what themes? Because as we look at next year and we set up webinars and the monthly calls, kind of what would you like to see those look like? And so it'd be real helpful to us to understand if these kinds of conversations that we maybe don't have some of the outsiders that I've brought in over the years, but rather, an insider, one of our own talking with us, if you like that, or, a combination or whatever you want to do. But I appreciate your feedback at any time. So Nicole, thank you. This has been just fabulous, and thank you to those of you who joined us today. And if you're on the recorded webinar, again, thank you for listening and taking to heart all the information that was shared today. So thank you all.
Marcia, if you want to, you can, put out my email out there too if anyone has any direct questions, or I'm happy to answer.
Could you state that right now, since I think Lisa's still recording? Could you state that here, and then we can also get it out?
Yes, it's N Erickson, ERICKSON. So it's N Erickson at homeoftheshamrock.org.
Thank you. And I will share that as well. Good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh. Bye.
Bye-bye.